name is Rodrisha Rusaw. I am the Executive Director of the Ordinary People Society located in Dothan, Alabama, also proud board member of Alabama Forward. The Ordinary People Society is the longest criminal justice and voting reform organization throughout the South, and we've actually been involved in restoration of rights for those that are formerly and currently incarcerated for 22 years now. We have been challenging legislators on particularly the issue of redistricting, what we're speaking for that same amount of time. But most of our increased work has happened over the last several years since the last redistricting cycle just passed. Prison gerrymandering is very important to redistricting because the process of prison gerrymandering is that there are district lines that are being drawn around highly populated areas where prisons are located in the state of Alabama, such as Limestone Prison. And so when those district lines are actually drawn around those prisons, it counts that population within that county. And as we know, in 2008, as I stated, that Glasgow versus Allen won a lawsuit that those that are incarcerated in prison that do not have a crime of moral turpitude can actually vote. So it is a myth that folks can't vote while they are currently in prison. And so what happens is that when these folks vote, they're not being counted actually where they live. They're being counted where they're housed, particularly in that district, due to the lack of education. And so that increases the vote in that particular area. And so what we're fighting against is prison gerrymandering, making sure that those districts are not inflating the vote through the prison population and that they're able to vote particularly where they actually live in.
I'm Jay Gregory Clark with Faith in Action Alabama. We want the voices of every Alabamian to be heard, whether they're free or incarcerated, no matter what their race, religion, or orientation may be. We want every voice to be heard. We have an opportunity to right some of the historical wrongs that have plagued Alabama. Today we have an opportunity to make the landscape of democracy a little more inclusive.
I'm Dr. Adia Winfrey, co-founder and executive director of Transform Alabama. I got involved in redistricting work beginning in 2021 because I had recently run for Congress in 2020. I was a Democratic nominee in Alabama's 3rd Congressional District. And because of everything that was going on at the time, COVID, the social unrest within our country, we used my congressional campaign as an opportunity to do political education throughout the 3rd Congressional District. County for county, the 3rd Congressional District had the lowest turnout in the state. And so we used my campaign as an opportunity to talk about the importance of each vote. And so that opened up the door for me to have these relationships throughout the 3rd District and just really talking about voting and what the lines look like. And so when the opportunity to continue that political education came with redistricting, with the public hearings, Transform Alabama jumped in. We actually formed after my congressional race in 2020. I think having 2 Black majority districts is an opportunity for people to feel heard, for Black Alabamians to feel that going to the polls is not just an act of duty, but it's actually an act of democracy. However, lines are not what win elections, votes do. So while I'm very much, pushing for 2 Black majority districts, and I recognize the importance of that, if people don't go out to vote, it doesn't matter what those maps look like. The number one thing is making sure people know that their vote matters and that they get out to the polls.
My name is Travis Jackson. I'm with the Black Lives / Voters Matter Coalition, and I'm also with Rolling to the Polls. We are a group of like-minded people that ensures safety and security for voters as we take them to their designated voting polls. For me, it's very personal because I've dealt with voter suppression or being misguided to the wrongful voting location when I started to exercise my right to vote in the state of Alabama, especially in the district where I'm at. I'm a firm believer that all voters cannot matter until Black voters matter. I am here in full support of the the Milligan family when it comes to instilling a second majority minority congressional district. I'm a firm believer that the current map that we had that was made in 2022, it prohibits Black, Indigenous, and voters of color from exercising their fundamental right in which many civil rights activists fought for in the early 60s.
Hey, my name is Ron James Jr. I'm from right here in the great city of Montgomery, Alabama. I am the regional organizer for Black Voters Matter, and we are here to represent Black voters in the opportunity to gain another Black majority congressional district here in the state of Alabama. So letting people know that, Black Voters Matter, that we're here, that our voices need to be heard, because when we vote, that we win.
Democracy Under Attack. I will be your host this evening. My name is Anisha Hardy. I am the Executive Director for Alabama Values. This evening's episode is titled Time to Redraw the Lines. This event is made possible through a collaboration between the Groundwork Project and the Southern Leadership for Voter Education. So let's dive into why we are here this evening. On yesterday, June 27th, the Alabama legislature held their first Reapportionment Committee meeting and public hearing as a result of SCOTUS ruling in the Milligan case, where the courts have ordered Alabama's legislators to redraw Alabama's congressional map to include a second Black majority congressional district. So if you missed yesterday's hearing, don't worry, we got you covered. That is what this evening is all about. We will be unpacking details regarding the hearing, also re-airing certain clips and discussing the proposed maps. We are joined by Zephyr Scalzetti, the digital organizer for Alabama Values and Alabama Values Progress. And also Zephyr is the host of Alabama Values blog series, They Better Get These Lines Right, where he breaks down all things redistricting and voting rights. We'll also be joined by Kendra Love, Alabama Values and Alabama Values Progress senior media strategist and host of Frame It, a news blog giving the 411 on what's happening on Alabama's political scene. And Shalila Dowdy, who is the executive director for Stand Up Mobile and a plaintiff in the Milligan case. And we will also be joined by Jerome Dees, who is the policy director for the Southern Poverty Law Center and vice president for our sister org, Alabama Values Progress. So let's kick things off hearing from Shalila Dowdy. But before we I want to point out that on decision day, we got a chance to catch up with a few of the plaintiffs just to get their reaction around the ruling. And so before Shalila comes and shares with us, I would love to share her video reaction.
Is Shalila Dowdy. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and I am a plaintiff in the Allen versus Milligan U.S. Supreme Court case. I represent the 1st Congressional District of Alabama, and it's been an emotional experience being a part of basically fighting for Black voting political power within Alabama. So the Supreme Court decision came down, and I found out about the ruling a little after 9 Central Time. And ironically, on this day, I actually slept in, and I'm normally up early. But one of our attorneys called and gave me the good news, so I was excited to hear that. I was surprised just given the way that previous decisions have been decided upon from this court, I was surprised because I had the mindset that we were going to be in this fight for the long run. But I'm happy with the news. I'm happy for Black voters in Alabama. I'm happy for Black people across the South, because this isn't just a win for Black Alabamians. It's a win for Black people across the South. It's been centered basically on the fight for fair maps. We've had a lot of power on the line, and this is about fair and proper representation and about protecting democracy and what our nation truly stands for. So it's weird trying to describe how I feel, because we're still waiting on the maps to be drawn. There's still work to be due. There's still good trouble to get into. But right now, for today, I say congratulations to those in Alabama who've just been a part of this. It just hasn't been the plaintiff. There's been other entities sharing our story, the attorneys from the Legal Defense Fund. So it's been a team effort. It's great to see Alabama once again continuously leading the fight for voting rights, and knowing that this case will set precedents for other Black people across the South to achieve the fair maps that they deserve. So I think this is a great win for the state of Alabama. I don't want to say it's a once in a lifetime win. It feels like that. That's what it feels like right now. But I want to have faith that the way that our Constitution is written and those who are being willing to stand up and advocate will continue. The fight will go on. And for today, we celebrate this win in the great state of Alabama. So I'm here to talk about just redistricting as a whole in my experience. So I got involved in redistricting in 2020 after the the census count occurred, and I was a crowd fellow. And so basically with that, it entailed me going around the southern region of the state and informing people on the redistricting process that was coming up and encouraging citizens to play a role in the map drawing process, and to encourage people to get involved in the public hearings that we were having across the state. It was a known fact that, Alabama only had one majority minority district, and going into the redrawing of the maps, we made it our business to push the initiative of the importance of making sure that our state legislators heard our voice of making sure that a second majority Black district was drawn. I basically attended almost every hearing virtually, and then I attended the Mobile one in person. And there was only one common theme that you heard across the state, and that was please do not dilute the Black vote and draw a second majority Black district, where our state leaders basically ignored us, and the maps came out and they looked just about the same. And so we proceeded with litigation. I was asked to be a plaintiff on the case, originally Milligan versus Merrill. I decided to be a plaintiff because I knew my congressional district, the first congressional district, needed representation. And doing the work of redistricting in my area, there really wasn't many minorities, honestly, that was bringing awareness to the need to make sure our maps were fair. I saw a lot of people outside our community, honestly. And when I say outside my community, outside the Black community, like the League of Women Voters and other entities. And so I chose to offer up my free time and commit to the cause of fighting for fair maps, and chose to be a plaintiff in the case. I think there really isn't a perfect time when it comes to fighting for what's right. So it's always the right time to do the right thing. And even if you don't know the outcome, you don't know if you're going to win, you don't know if you're going to be successful, I decided to be a plaintiff and fight for fair maps, to know that I at least tried. There will never be a questioning of what if I would have used my voice or utilized my platform or stood up for those in my community. So we got the outcome that we desired. And the importance of the ruling of this case is that it's not just a win, as you saw in the previous video. It's not just a win for Black Alabamians. It is June 28th, and we've heard the news about Louisiana's maps being sent back to their lower courts, which will probably result in them having a second majority minority district as well. So this case sets the precedence for Black voting political power across the South to be gained, so that Black people can go to the polls and just feel confident in knowing that they can elect someone who will go to DC and possibly consider our needs and what our community needs when it comes to fighting for fair maps. And just the representation that we need. We have an issue in Alabama dealing with broadband, and we have a state leader who just was praising the fact that the rural areas will possibly be getting broadband, but they voted against it. So we want to make sure we have the right people in the seats, and that's what these fair maps kind of go right back to, making sure that we're able to elect like-minded individuals who will fight on our behalf and those outside of our community as well. And so I'm excited to see where we are going with this. I'm excited to see other people excited, and it's just great to be a part of this fight.
Thank you, Shalila. Thank you so much for being a part of this collective fight. I often say that every major shift that has happened, in our nation's history has come from the strength and will of ordinary, people doing extraordinary things, whether it's from the civil rights movement in the 60s to the grassroots movement of today. Our democracy has always been upheld, I guess, or fortified by the people. So before you go, I did want to put one question out there. I know you also served as a crowd fellow. That I know Stand Up Mobile does a lot of work around, voter engagement, education. Could you maybe just briefly provide some context of the very lived voting realities for Black people in Alabama, whether it's through voter suppression, and I feel this is important context, so that as we go through these hearings and we hear about these proposed maps, and we look at the percentages, it's important to, we look at the percentages. It's important to also to acknowledge the barriers that exist in a lot of these, marginalized and disenfranchised communities.
That's a great question, and I definitely meant to hit on that. As a Black voter in Alabama, it's kind of discouraging knowing that, okay, we have fair maps, but there are still tactics in place hindering us having fair and equal access to the ballot box. And so we just saw, I forgot the name of the bill, but we just saw with our last legislative session.
HB 209?
209?
Was it the absentee ballot bill?
I was talking about the absentee ballot one. And so we just saw, we had state legislators who want to make it a criminal offense for individuals to help others fill out the absentee ballot. And I know personally from working on previous campaigns, there are a lot of elderly people who don't have access to printers to make a copy of their ID, because that's needed when you mail in your absentee request application. There's people that just don't understand the process. They don't understand that if you get it notarized, you don't necessarily need 2 signatures. And so it's important for us to continue to be able to do this work. I feel like the bill that they were trying to push was a attack against Black and brown voters and voters who belong to a particular political party. And so it was a way to try to diminish our vote and weaken the power of our vote. Alabama also does not have official early voting. We have to have an excuse when we do vote absentee ballot. And so we see other states, neighboring states like Louisiana and Georgia, where for about 2 to 3 weeks, you can say every day is election day, and you can consistently encourage people, hey, y'all know we got an election coming up. You can go to the polls and vote today. But we don't have that in Alabama. Then we have it where voter registration is cut off about 2 weeks before the election. It may seem like, they're just preparing for the election, preparing the rolls, but realistically, when you look at it, that's another tactic of voter suppression. And so even with fair maps, there is still a fight and a battle when it comes to protecting equal access to the ballot box. And so, we got this win, but I think we just need to be reminded to not get comfortable, still know that there's still evil in the working. There's still people working against us. there are still people who know the power of our vote. That's the issue. They wouldn't be trying to implement tactics that can fall within the suppression realm if there was no power within our vote. So I just want to remind people that there is power in our vote, and it can be seen from those voter suppression tactics that do currently exist.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much, Shalila, for joining us. And we're going to transition to the next portion of this evening's briefing. And we're going to hear from Kendra Love. And Kendra's going to dive into yesterday's reapportionment, take a deeper dive into yesterday's Reapportionment Committee meeting and public hearing and recap some of the key moments for us. Super excited about this because she'll be doing a live recording of Frame It of the vlog. So we'll kick it to Frame It.
We welcome you to a live recording of Frame It, where we work to deliver facts, increase transparency, and demand accountability in Alabama's democratic processes. Frame It is brought to you by Alabama Values Progress, a media advocacy organization breaking the cycle of disinformation during the times where the truth is hard to find. On today's episode, we will discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Reapportionment Committee's first public hearing in the state's court-ordered redrawing of Alabama's congressional maps that must include 2 Black majority districts. For background, the United States Supreme Court ruled in favor of Alabamians who sued the state legislature for violating Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act by packing Black voters into Congressional District 7 and cracking the remaining Black voters across Alabama's other 6 congressional districts. It's important to note that the 2020 census showed that the white Alabama population is declining and that Black Alabamians represent about 27% of Alabamians, but the congressional maps passed by the legislature in November 2021 only created 1 Black majority congressional district, which reflects only 14% of the congressional representation in the House of Representatives. Now, the state legislature has until July 21st to submit maps that create 2 majority-minority districts to the federal 3-judge panel. Tuesday's Reapportionment Committee meeting got off to a rocky start when it held elections for co-chairs of the committee.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the...
Senator Vivian Figures said she felt there should be a committee member from the minority party elected as co-chair of the committee, and Representative Laura Hall nominated Representative Chris England. The committee voted 14-7 to elect Representative Chris Pringle. So let's take a look at that clip from that exchange.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the recognition. I think in light of us having coming back here for this reason of redrawing the congressional lines for the state of Alabama, coming from the court case, I think that it's important that we show diversity in our chairmanships. And I think it would send a great message of, in the spirit of fairness and in the spirit of bipartisanship, that we have 1 chair from the House who is 1 chair from each House, if you will, be a minority. And I would like to yield to Representative Hall for that nomination for the House co-chair.
And I'd like to nominate Chris England.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. We have a motion to close nominations on the House co-chair.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Now we have a, do we just want to vote on the House? You want to vote on the House first?
I guess we'll do it.
I'd like to have a roll call vote, Mr. Chair.
We have a roll call vote on the House co-chairman. The clerk will call the roll, and you'll announce, the members will announce who they're supporting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
point of order. Who are the candidates that?
It would be me and Representative England.
Okay, so the vote would be mentioned Representative England or Representative Pringle?
Yes, for the House co-chair. Then we'll elect a Senate co-chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I'm just asking that one would be a minority and the other one would be a majority, or if you will, one a Democrat and the other one a Republican.
I second.
Well, you heard the motion. The clerk will call the roll, and the members will announce their vote for either Pringle or England.
Senator Barfoot.
Representative Pringle.
Senator Bell.
Representative Pringle.
Senator Chastain.
Representative Pringle.
Senator Figures.
Representative Chris England.
Senator Livingston.
Representative Pringle.
Senator Orr.
Representative Pringle.
Senator Roberts.
Representative Pringle.
Senator Schofield.
Representative Pringle.
Senator Singleton.
Representative England.
Senator Smitherman.
Representative England.
Senator Williams.
Representative Pringle.
Representative Allman.
Representative Pringle.
Representative Boyd.
Representative Chris
Carnes. Representative Klaus.
Representative Pringle.
Representative Ellis.
Representative Pringle.
Representative England.
Representative England.
Representative Hall.
Representative Chris England.
Representative Jones.
Representative England.
Representative Laverne.
Representative Pringle.
Representative Pringle.
Pringle.
Representative Reynolds.
Representative Pringle.
There's 14-7 for Pringle.
So not only did the Reapportionment Committee elect a co-chair that was a white man from the House of Representatives, in their second attempt to have a black voice as co-chair on the committee ordered by the court to draw 2 black majority districts, Representative Laura Hall nominated Senator Bobby Singleton. And when the committee voted, they also voted 14-7 to elect Senator Steve Livingston as the co-chair from the Senate. So that doesn't really paint a picture that white legislators have learned anything from losing a case at the high court. If that wasn't bad enough, Representative Pringle presented guidelines for the committee to vote on at the July 13th meeting. But get this, the guidelines are the exact same guidelines that were used for the 2021 redistricting cycle. And y'all, Representative England asked about making changes to those guidelines, given the fact that those guidelines are the ones that landed the legislature in court. So y'all got to listen to this clip as well.
Will be presented to the federal court in Birmingham on August the 14th. And then we'll have a hearing in Birmingham when the court schedules it. But this is just one of many steps that we have to go through on this process. You want to do the let's just talk about it. All right. Everybody on the committee has been given a copy of the guidelines. We ask you to please review those guidelines. Since today is just a public hearing, we're not going to adopt anything, but we do want to hear. We want you to read the guidelines, review them, and we'll discuss them and we'll vote on them in the next meeting. So that gives you plenty of time to look at them and review them.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
So am I looking at what is it? What's the heading at your guidance?
Reapportionment Committee Redistricting Guidelines.
What's the date? Do you have a date on there?
May 5th, 2021. Yeah, they're carried over from the last adopted guidelines. That's the reason we want everybody to read them and look at them.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm looking at these, but they seem to me to be the,
Would you please turn your microphone on?
I thought I had it on.
No. There you go.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at these dated May 5, 2021. These are the ones that we had last time. My question is, how do these differ in any way from those we used before, if they're the same or what?
They're the same. We gave you the ones that we had adopted last time for your review and input, and we're going to talk about them and vote on them next time.
Well, I'm saying this because I already had a copy of these from last year, and I just wanted to make sure that I'm on the right page.
Yes, ma'am.
Start off right.
Yes, ma'am.
Unity.
Yes, ma'am.
The way we are. Thank
We're not hiding anything. These are the existing guidelines, and we want everybody to look at them and review them, and we'll talk about them next time.
And
Yes, sir.
will there be
I guess there will be some sort of procedure that we'll adopt if we're offering amendments to these guidelines.
We're going to have a meeting to discuss them, yes, sir, in the next meeting.
It would seem to me that it would be important for us to try to change the procedure, considering the initial procedure got us in a little bit of hot water. So maybe over the course of the next couple of weeks, we could take a look at these guidelines and see if there's some things that need to be tweaked so we can avoid ending up back in court for doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So do I need to submit any changes to these guidelines in writing prior to the next meeting, or do I need to wait till we get here?
It would be helpful, yes, sir. That way we can have the lawyers review the changes to make sure they're compliant with the Constitution and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
Speaking of the attorney, the Reapportionment Committee has hired Dorman Walker once again to be the attorney/consultant in redistricting. Y'all, Walker has served in this capacity for the last few redistricting cycles, and all of which have landed the state in court, and they had to redraw remedial maps. During the 2021 public hearings, we challenged Walker about fairness and created fair districts, and his answer definitely explains his viewpoints on fairness. So let's take a look at that clip.
We have a final comment from Kendra Majors. In the earlier hearing, you vaguely touched on the fact that redistricting in Alabama is not really nonpartisan. How does that work to guarantee fair districts and fair representation for all Alabamians, given that one party overwhelmingly controls the Alabama legislature currently?
I'm not going to answer that question. Fairness is in the eyes of the beholder, and I think that's where I'll leave it.
No other questions or comments?
Is anybody else in the auditorium who wants to speak? All right. There being no one else who wants to speak, thank you to everyone for participating either remotely or by coming to the auditorium. Your participation is important to the process. Thank you for Lurleen B. Wallace Community College for allowing us to have the hearing at your facility, and this hearing is now closed.
Anyway, moving on, as that's a topic I can definitely go on and on about, but I want to get back to the public hearing that we had yesterday. At the beginning of the public hearing, Dorman Walker entered a letter submitted by the Milligan and Castor plaintiffs into the record outlining the map supported by the plaintiffs. And Representative England said that the plaintiffs in the case that got the legislature to redrawing were the Milligan and Castor plaintiffs and not the Singleton case. Pringle said that no one from the plaintiffs were in the room. But Letitia Jackson, who's a plaintiff, quickly let Pringle know that some of the plaintiffs were in the room. Senator Roger Smitherman said that this process is totally independent from the case and that they are there to remedy the maps. Let's see. The plaintiffs in the case spoke first after being invited to speak. First, we heard from Evan Milligan, who's the executive director of Alabama Ford and the lead plaintiff in the Allen v. Milligan case. And he said that their case was the one the Supreme Court ruled on in terms of hearing their argument in terms of the opportunity districts in Alabama. Without opportunity districts for Black voters in Alabama, you wouldn't have Black voters in Alabama having the ability to elect candidates of their choice, Milligan said. Milligan said the plaintiff's remedial plan keeps together the 18 counties that are the core of the Alabama Black Belt, and those counties are either in District 2 or District 7 of the maps proposed by the plaintiffs. Milligan said that the plan addresses the packing and cracking that the congressional map that was passed in 2021 had, and additionally, the map maintained the top portion of the map passed by the legislature in 2021. Letitia Jackson and Bernard Simulton also spoke. Simulton gave support to the map submitted by the plaintiffs, and Jackson read the letter the Milligan and Castor plaintiffs submitted to the Reapportionment Committee with their remedial plan. Travis Jackson of Montgomery, who is an Iraq war veteran and activist, said that he fought for the rights of all Americans. Black voters have always been the major factor for for a much brighter democracy. He said, "This is a proven fact throughout our American history. When it pertains to repairing human or civil rights, voting, healthcare, education, employment, housing, and hunger advocacy, Black voters were and have continued to become political superheroes within our economy." Dr. Adia Winfrey, Executive Director of Transform Alabama, said that her organization helped mobilize folks to public hearings in 2021. So we've been watching this case closely, she said. "My concern is that we are less than 3 weeks out. We are already seeing how the plaintiffs are making a difference outside of Alabama. I implore you to put your politics aside and put the people of Alabama in the forefront." Ronald James Jr. of Black Voters Matter said that numbers don't lie. If we don't know our history, it will tend to repeat itself. Alabama has a history of ignoring federal mandates, he said. "Make the maps equal and fair. The maps represented by the plaintiffs, the people of Alabama. We're not begging for anything. We're just asking for a fair shot. Don't split us up. Keep us together. When we all vote, we all win. Do what's right, and let's push Alabama forward." Another exchange that is worth noting is the exchange between Attorney Jim Blackshear and Representative England. Blackshear spoke on a map that the Singleton plaintiffs are supporting. Blackshear said the plan keeps all the Black Belt counties in one district minus Barber County, and then puts Jefferson County in a single district. Blackshear said that Jefferson County is the one county that has demonstrated crossover voting to elect candidates supported by Black voters. So let's listen to the exchange between Blackshear and Representative England.
Yeah, I'm not going to keep you long. I just want to make a very clear distinction. Your case, the case that you represent, it's still pending, correct?
We represent the Singleton plaintiffs in a case that's still pending before the three-judge court and has not been, our constitutional claim against the 2021 plan has not yet been addressed, yes.
All right, so you aren't a party to the case that we're here on, like what got us here, correct?
No, we are consolidated. We are parties in the consolidated litigation, and we are parties to what remedy is adopted by the three-judge court.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Walker asked you a question initially that said, or not asked a question, you a question, but asked the other presenters a question saying, whether or not you agreed with or were presented with the maps from the Milligan and Castor plaintiffs. Have you seen those maps?
Yes.
All right. Do you agree with those maps?
I agree that those maps provide opportunity districts for Black voters, but I have my doubts about whether it could satisfy strict scrutiny under the Constitution because of the way it splits Mobile and Jefferson County along racial lines.
All right, so the question is, you do not agree with the maps from the Castor or Milligan, the map that was presented from the Castor and Milligan plaintiffs, correct?
It's not a question of whether I agree with it or not. I think it's a good map for the purpose for which it was drawn. I'm just saying that I don't believe that it's going to be able to pass strict scrutiny if it goes before the three-judge court for that decision.
And you say satisfying the standard of strict scrutiny because why?
Because it splits counties along racial lines to achieve a racial target of 50% plus one.
But each map that you presented also does that.
No.
Well, I mean, because Tuscaloosa is split.
Tuscaloosa is split, as are 5 other counties, in order to accomplish zero deviation.
So in closing, let me put it in a frame for you. While the Reapportionment Committee was back to work this week, there is still a big need to keep a close eye on them. Taking into account Alabama's history of unfair maps and a white majority committee, an attorney with a long-standing reputation of drawing maps that are unconstitutional, our fight is far from over. But it's important to remember that we've come too far to stop the fight now. Let's keep working and remember there's power in the collective. See y'all at the State House on June 13th at 1:30 p.m. for the second public hearing. We'll need y'all to pull up and represent. Thank you for tuning in to this live episode of Frame It. I'm Kendra Love, and I'm signing off. Join us next time as we continue to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly going on at the State House. You can catch future episodes by following us on social media and visiting us on the web.
Thank you, Kendra. Thank you so much. One correction, July 13th. I know June 13th has already happened, but joining us at the State House. Yes, we can't go back in the past anyway, right? Unless you have a time machine. But no, July 13th at 1:30. I encourage everyone to come out. That is an opportunity to use your voice and to speak to what you would like to see in your community, right? And then also give this issue a human face, right? I always say, power in the collective and power to the people, right? So again, that's July 13th, the next public hearing. All right. So next, we are going to hear from Zephyr Scalzetti, who's going to dive into the proposed maps. So let's kick it to Zephyr.
Hey, y'all. How you doing?
Hey, Zephyr.
Just waiting for my slides. There we go. All right, y'all. My name is Zephyr Scalzetti, and if you've ever seen any of these episodes of They Better Get These Lines Right, and if you haven't, you should check them out on our YouTube page at Ala Values. But today we've got a really important topic to dive into, the second redistricting attempt and the maps recently presented to the Reapportionment Committee. If you've tuned into any of our They Better Get These Lines Right episodes, you probably have this next line memorized. Redistricting is our once-in-a-decade process of accounting for state-level population changes across the country, but in this case in Alabama, to draw new district maps from the federal level to the local level, which makes an impact on how funding is distributed for healthcare, schools, and roads, which is why you need to be paying attention to this. This evening, we're doing something special. We're going to talk about how the sausage gets made live on camera. I hope you are as terrified as I am. We'll examine a few of the new maps that have been presented, and we're going to scrutinize a little bit of some of their potential impacts on our electoral system, shed light on the ongoing discussions surrounding this crucial redistricting process. We'll discuss some of the potential effects these maps may have on political power, voter distribution, and the communities within each district. It's crucial to understand the implications of redistricting because it can profoundly influence elections, representation, and the overall democratic process. So let's dive in and explore a selection of the maps presented to the Reapportionment Committee for the second redistricting attempt. It's time to understand the process, voice our concerns, and work towards a fair and inclusive electoral system. If that wasn't enough, I did write out slides, so they better get these lines right, y'all. Let's dive in here. So before we can talk about what these maps and proposed maps look like, we need to talk about what we want to accomplish with maps. What are we looking to see in a fair map? This is by no means an exhaustive list, but just a way to get us all in the right frame of mind to talk about these sorts of issues. What makes a fair map, generally speaking? So what's the goal of this? We want fair congressional districts because we want to ensure democratic representation. We want to promote a balanced and equitable political system. So here's some key objectives, and again, not all key objectives, but some key objectives associated with fair congressional districts. We can talk about equal representation, eliminating gerrymandering, compactness and contiguity. Compactness is how close together things are, like if a district is mostly oval or square, and contiguity means that the district is connected, not like little islands everywhere. Promoting competitiveness, preserving communities of interest, and long-term stability. So let's dive into those concepts just real quick. So equal representation, we can also label this one person, one vote. So fair congressional districts aim to ensure that each person's vote carries equal weight. So by creating districts with roughly equal populations, the goal is to prevent any particular group or community from being overrepresented or underrepresented in Congress. And this is a special thing that happens with congressional districts. We can actually, per Alabama's guidelines and rules around this, typically we can only deviate in each district by one person. So you're going to see these really big numbers like 717,700 and I cannot remember exactly what, but I think it's 794 and 17,795. So they're just changing by one number. When we talk about other districts, like in your local city council, those numbers can actually deviate by plus or minus 5%, but we're talking about a really small margin, just one person on the congressional map. So we want really exact representation here. Eliminating gerrymandering. Our maps got thrown out because they were racially gerrymandered. And so this is our second attempt and a chance to alleviate and bring equitable representation for Black voters in the state. So we saw, again, racial gerrymandering, which was an attempt to diminish and dilute the power of Black voters in our state. But there also can be things like partisan gerrymandering, putting voters of a particular party into a small number of districts, giving another party an unfair advantage, and diluting representation of certain groups. So fair districts aim to prevent partisan manipulation and also manipulation of other kinds, like economic and others. We have a previous episode of They Better Get These Lines Right that dives into some of these different types of gerrymandering. So y'all should check that out if you want to learn more. Competitiveness. Competitiveness is how likely a district can be to flip. So competitive districts are considered between 45 and 55%, in the range of like Democratic and Republican. So if you have a district that's outside of that benchmark, it's very unlikely that the district will flip to the opposite party. What a competitive district can do is that it encourages competitive elections. There aren't excessively safe seats for any particular party. Now, however, in Alabama, because there's such a high correlation of Black voters in the Democratic Party, there is also then again a high correlation between a safe Black majority minority district and a Democratic district. So competitiveness may not be a factor that we want to rate really highly here, but it is something to keep in mind that there are pros and cons to all of these things. And we should be also, looking at things as like, well, is it possible for greater voter engagement to increase accountability of elected officials because they know they have to really try for their seats. Something else that happens, particularly in Alabama, we have all of our districts. We have no competitive congressional districts. All of our districts are very, very safe seats, either very safe Republican or very safe Democratic seats. And what that means is that the primary elections become the real election. And that's a problem for voter engagement because most folks do not know when the Democratic primary election is. It's usually, I think, in May, and then everybody thinks of November as the real election. But by that point, your nominee for whatever party is likely going to be the winner of that district. So again, things that we should keep in mind as a balancing act between all of these things that make up a fair district in Alabama. Preserving communities of interest. This one is really important. So fair districts aim to respect and preserve communities of interest, whether that's geographical, cultural, racial, or ethnic communities that share common concerns or characteristics. For example, the Black Belt in Alabama. By keeping these communities intact within a single district, fair redistricting can ensure their effective representation and prevent fragmentation or cracking across multiple districts. Cracking is what happened to Alabama's racially gerrymandered maps, the previous ones that were thrown out. Okay, and lastly, long-term stability. So this is not, I would not in any way put this as like top of my list, but this is something to keep in mind, which is that if you are if you're drawing a congressional map, you want to draw a map that you think can stay as a map for a long period of time, not just to the next census date, but you want to look ahead a little bit. If you think about it, if you've lived in, for example, myself, I've lived in Congressional District 7 the entirety of my adult life. That has recently changed because I've moved. But, if I were living in my old apartment and all of a sudden I lived under a whole new congressional district, that's a bit of a sea change. You don't want that to be happening to people every 10 years. You don't want them, ideally, populations do grow, things do change. So this is, again, not a hard and fast rule, but you want to think about some of the long-term. How are people moving around the state? What areas are exploding in population? And you want to kind of try to keep that in mind because, again, this is a good way to increase not only voter education and voter engagement, but also to allow whatever official is representing that area to get to know their constituents, to get to know the needs of their area, and to get a sense of like, well, this is what District 7 needs. This is what District 2 needs. This is the economic, impact of District 1. It gives them a chance to be involved with these communities. Okay, so let's dive into some of these maps. So I'm going to blow through some of these first couple ones really quickly. There are currently 12 maps officially filed that are on the alabama.gov website that you can go and see for yourself right now. The reapportionment tab is a little tricky to find, but it is there. The plaintiff maps are named such. They're named plaintiff maps 1 through 11 because these were maps that were filed alongside the court cases, the Supreme Court cases, to try to get Alabama fairer maps. And so these maps were filed as examples of, hey, it's possible. Here's a blueprint for how to do this. You don't have to adopt any of these maps specifically, but these are just, we've got so many examples of ways that you can do this fairly. So plaintiff maps 1 and 2 both feature 2 majority Black districts, so 2 districts that are 50% or greater Black voting age population. This is a term you might actually hear. We're not just talking about Black people. This isn't a district that is just majority Black. It needs to be specifically majority Black voters, so 18 years old and older. It is sometimes shortened to BVAP. But I will try to say it out this entire time. So these are plaintiff maps 1 and 2. And here are plaintiff maps 3 and 4. Also have 2 Black majority districts of 50% or greater for both of these maps. Now, when we get to plaintiff maps 5, 6, and 7, I've grouped these together because these maps have one district that is, I believe, like in the 52 to 54% majority Black district, but the second district is what we might call an opportunity district. Now, in this case, for these 3 maps, that opportunity district is like 47 to 49% Black voting age population. So that's very close to 50. You know, they do still make up a majority. They're the majority ethnic group like in that area and in those maps. So it's the reason it's called an opportunity district is because there's an opportunity for Black voters to elect the candidate of their choice. It is somewhat of a misnomer that what the Supreme Court said was that we have to have 2 majority Black districts. What they said is that we have to have 2 majority Black districts or an opportunity district that allows Black voters to elect a representative of their choice. And there's no specific line that's saying like this amount of Black people, this percentage is what we need to have. But we need to keep in mind, like Shalila said earlier, that voting as a Black person in Alabama has a long and storied history of being disenfranchised, being difficult. And so what we really would like to see is a map that has more Black people in it than less. So really either being 50% or greater or very close to that line. Just very close to that line. So these maps are technically under 50%, but they are very close to that line and very likely would give Black voters the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. Okay, it should not be there like that. Sorry. The Moon Duchenne maps. These were filed with the Milligan case. These are 4 example maps. And what you can see, these maps also have 2 Black majority districts, greater than 50%. But what you can see is that these maps actually all have much more compact scores than any of the example maps we've seen so far. You can see districts 4 and 5 look much nicer than we've seen on our maps. And I will tell you that our maps have looked, how our congressional map looks currently, they have roughly looked like that skeleton since the 70s. And before the 70s, we didn't redistrict. So that's essentially the same kind of map. So this map, this general type of map would represent a new way of looking at our congressional maps. And remember what I said about stability, the maps that we adopt now, we are likely going to be locking in that shape or that general structure for the long term. So if we think about not just the next 4 years or the next 10 years, thinking about what we want to see in the next 2 redistricting cycles, for example. Is it something that is more compact, that has fairer districts across the entirety of the state, or do we just want to fix the Black Belt? And this is the map. This is the Voting Rights Act plaintiffs map. So the Milligan and Castor plaintiffs have all come together and they are endorsing this map as the map of their choice. This map does have, again, 2 majority Black districts. So I've blown up the stats for y'all so we can talk about this map for a minute. The map is, the one district is 50% BVAP, Black voting age population, and District 7 is 54% BVAP. So 54%. The District 7 was 56%, I believe, beforehand, which was considered packed because of the lack of a second district. You could argue in this case that there might be a few more Black voters in District 7 than you may need, but honestly, I don't think 54 would be packed. I think that's a safe district. So some of the pros and cons of this map, obviously pros, 2 majority Black districts, 2 probably safe majority Black districts, 50%, 54%. Seems pretty likely that Black voters will have the ability to elect the candidate of their choice. Some of the downsides is this lack of compactness in districts 4 and 5. In fact, from here up, this map is identical to all of our previous congressional maps. So all of the changes have essentially happened from here down south. Now, granted, a lot of great changes from the middle down south. Now, that being a lack of change up here, you can also argue that as a pro. Remember, the stability arguments goes both ways. On one hand, we could get more compactness. On the other hand, this is now keeping core of previous districts, and so folks who have already been in districts 4 and 5 are staying in districts 4 and 5. So you can really make an argument either way. And this is, again, about balancing the different parameters of what makes a fair map. And this is why showing up to the public hearings are important, y'all, because it's important to talk about what you want to see for your community. And this is the CLC Singleton map. Now, what's interesting about this map is that this map was kind of snuck in a little bit. This map was not in the packets. When we walked in, there were all these papers laid out, all of these printed maps, all these bright colors. We all picked up, these pieces of paper, and this map wasn't on there. But the committee actually called up the lawyer who had argued for this map. This was a map that was also filed as an example map. It's just, hey, here's another way that we could do this. But it seems like there are some representatives who are really gung-ho about this map. So I just want to talk about this really quickly. So this map, the plaintiff maps we saw earlier that had opportunity districts were high in the 40%. They were like 45, 46, 47. I think one is 49% Black voting age population. This map has 2 opportunity districts. So there actually isn't any, there's no majority Black district on this map at all. None. The highest Black majority population map on this map is district on this map is 49%. So we're not even getting over 50% on District 7. And then District 6 only has 39.6% Black voting age population. That's this Jefferson County map right here. And I will tell y'all, as a longtime resident of Jefferson County, when I first started the redistricting process, drawing a map like this, where Jefferson County made up its own district, was a personal high priority of mine. But it became very obvious very quickly that just doesn't make a good map. I mean, I'm very pro not splitting Jefferson County as well, but it's just not a good idea. And you can see exactly why in these statistics, having a second majority Black district or second district where Black voters get the opportunity district and only having it be 39% is really low. You're really depending on a lot of white crossover voting to allow them to elect candidates of their choice. And just because Black voters and Democrats run alongside each other, there's a high correlation, that doesn't mean that you can sub one for the other. You still should allow Black voters to choose their candidate of choice that may not actually line up with partisan lines. There's a lot of things about that. And obviously we can see, there's a lot of messiness in how the Black belt is split up. District 2 kind of then becomes this big C shape. So yeah, this is a map that I think is a great way to show some examples of how this can be done. But in terms of an actual map that we want to be splitting up resources in the state around, not my fave. Oh, I forgot that I wrote this out and said that it was, yeah. So what is an amicus brief? I'm sorry, y'all. I think I jumped right over this. They're briefs written by individuals or groups who are not directly involved in a legal case, but have expertise or insight to offer court to assist in making its decision. So in this case, these were filed not only by plaintiffs, but also by, in this case, Campaign Legal Center and other groups that were interested in saying, like, hey, the Milligan plaintiffs are right. There are multiple ways to draw these maps. I forgot that I wrote these out, and then I just said them. So now you have the pretty things. All right, timeline. We're closing this out. The deadline for all proposed maps to be submitted to the Reapportionment Committee is July 7th. Representative Pringle said that they've gotten submissions from as far away as France. So I'm not sure who in France is very interested in Alabama redistricting, but cool. Bring them on. The next and last public hearing and committee meeting is going to be on the 13th, July 13th, like we said earlier, at 1:30 p.m. in the State House. That's a Thursday. On July 17th, the special session will begin. And on July 21st, the new congressional map is due to the district court. So until next time, y'all, they better get these lines right. And if they don't, the Northern District Court of Alabama will have something to say about it on August 14th. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Zephyr, for that detailed presentation. Thank you. I want to encourage folks, if you have questions, please put them in the comment section of whatever platform you are watching this on. We are approaching the end, but we're going to head over to our policy corner. We will now hear from Jerome Dees, Policy Director for the Southern Poverty Law Center, where he will briefly discuss, just where we are in the process and what we're trying to achieve. And then also touch on, you heard some terms, opportunity districts versus minority majority district. So Jerome, take it away.
Good evening, everybody. I have the wonderful opportunity to follow behind kind of that wonderful presentation that you just heard. So it makes my job easier to just kind of recap very briefly and break down everything that you just heard, and then kind of tie everything in a nice, neat little bow as we begin to wrap up. So again, as you heard, we are here as a result of litigation that was filed in the beginning of 2022 after a special session in November 2021 that required the drafting of maps for the purpose of redistricting for our upcoming elections. During that process, testimony was heard from the general public. There were statewide public hearings that were held at places like Lurleen B. Wallace Community College and elsewhere throughout the state, providing input of what the general citizens would like to see in their map. Unfortunately, the state legislature decided to completely disregard that and draw maps as they saw fit. And over a year and a half worth of litigation, first at the local district court level, where they were told that those maps were going to be unconstitutional, all the way up to the Supreme Court, which affirmed that lower court's decision saying that the maps were unconstitutional. Now brings us to where we are right now with the opportunity to draw these maps again in a way that allows truly reflective representation in the state of Alabama. So on Tuesday, we had the first public hearing where individuals again had the opportunity to give their testimony, talk about the communities that they live in, what the interests are in those particular communities. So that way, not only the legislature has that they can use to draw those maps, but importantly, so that it is now a part of the federal court record. So as we look towards July 13th in that second public hearing, what I would do is strenuously encourage anybody that is able, either in person to attend, or if you can't attend in person, to write out testimony and submit it to the email address that was provided, which I believe is districts@alsenate.gov, and share with them the specific types of things that you would like to see in a map and why that is important to you, because that will become a part of the court record that the federal court will take into consideration once the maps are passed during the special session, which will be from July 17th to July 21st. And then those maps are presented to the federal district court here in Birmingham, Alabama. They will look at those maps, but they will also pay attention to the full testimonial record, which includes hopefully your comments, your concerns, and your wishes. I want to talk briefly about some of the terms that Zephyr used in his presentation about the maps that you just saw. And some of those terms were opportunity district, Black voting age population, and majority minority districts. And that's particularly important because one of the things that the Supreme Court looked at as they were making their decision and ultimately determining that the map that the state legislature drew was unconstitutional is the concept of voter dilution, specifically voter dilution on the basis of race. And so when we take that into account, the idea that the state legislature engaged in a practice that knowingly and intentionally diluted the vote of African-American voters throughout the state, we understand the importance of why we focus on terms like Black voting age population as we determine the amount of individuals in a particular district and their ability to select a candidate and have that candidate have a realistic chance of winning based on those voters in that particular district. And so one of the things that the court looks at is, are you meeting some sort of kind of amorphous, unset, idealized threshold of Black voters of a voting age in a particular district? And generally, voting rights, legal scholars and academics look at kind of 50 as sort of that benchmark for a majority minority district. And so wherever possible, you would like to try and see 50% for there to be a true opportunity zone. Because particularly when you look at a state like Alabama, which has a long history of, and to throw out another academic term, racially polarized voting, which means that based on your race, you are more likely to vote or not vote for a particular type of candidate. So if you're a Black voter in Alabama, there is a particular type of candidate that you are 98% likely to vote on. That same candidate, if you are in a predominantly white district, you're only going to receive 15.4% of the vote. So when you see disparities like that between same candidates but different racial voting groups, that informs how the court determines whether or not a district is drawn as a true opportunity zone or whether it potentially violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and dilutes the vote of voters of color in Alabama. And so as we move forward towards July 13th and ultimately special session, it's incredibly important that all of us speak up loudly to our state representatives and others engaging in the process and let them know that the only thing that we will settle for is 2 districts that truly do give voters of color the opportunity, the real, genuine, and legitimate opportunity to elect candidates of their choosing. And the only way to guarantee that is by having majority minority districts, districts where the Black voting age population, or BVAP, is above 50%. And so as we've seen, the remedial map that was presented by the Milligan and Castor plaintiffs during the first public hearing on Tuesday meets that criteria. It has 2 districts that have 50% Black voting age population, and it satisfies a lot of the other constitutional requirements, such as contiguity, meaning that the maps don't look super crazily gerrymandered, that there is some sense of continuity, that it's not a complete overhaul of the maps that we've historically been used to. So those are some of the things that the court will look at, and that we as voters and Alabamians should be asking or really demanding of our legislature to honor our wishes. So those are some of the things that we'll be looking for over the coming days and weeks. We are in a very fast pace because this is an incredibly quick turnaround, but we'll open up for any questions that you all may have, and I look forward to seeing you all in Montgomery on July 13th.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jerome, Zephyr, Shalila. Thank you all. I don't think we have any questions. We do have some comments in the chat. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you all. So thank you for sharing this insightful information. I want to point out, I do want to close this out and say that this fight for voting rights, and for fair maps, it has gone through many stages, with organizers and advocates mobilizing on the ground, and then it moved into the courtrooms through litigation where legal advocates, continue to fight to overturn these unfair maps. But the fight is not just on the streets or in the courtroom. It is also in the committee meetings and public hearings. So I encourage everyone to attend, whether it's virtually or in person, the upcoming Reapportionment Committee meeting on July 13th at 1:30 p.m. That is the deadline to speak up. Your presence is crucial. Simply put, the people, you all, we are the heart of this fight. The decisions made in these meetings and hearings will directly impact your voting rights and your community's representation. So by attending, you bear witness to the decisions being made. You can hold your representatives accountable and ensure transparency in the process. And by sharing your experiences and expressing your concerns for your community, as I mentioned, you bring a human face to this struggle, to this fight. And you give a voice to your community, compelling those empowered to acknowledge the very real realities that voters are living in, and that your community is experiencing. And so your testimony can shape the narrative and influence decisions, and ensure that we can at least sound the alarm and call for fairness and representation. During that, fairness and representation guides this reapportionment process. So we will be doing this again also after the next reapportionment, or after the July 13th public hearing. Please stay connected with us. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at ALA Values, and also sign up to receive e-news and text updates. And that's at bit.ly/session updates to stay informed with what's happening during this process. As Jerome mentioned, it is moving fast, y'all. So we're going to put in the work to make sure that you get plugged in, and that you have the information that you need to advocate for fair maps in your communities. Thank you so much for joining us, and that's all.